Okay, Mason, these are the things that we think you need to be working on. First of all, let's talk about stance width. You are a long-limbed guy, and we've got to accommodate that in the stance. So you may not look exactly like what we talked about in terms of an optimal setup, but looking at you, really the arms, the legs, and the torso are pretty proportional, so you're probably going to look pretty close to that optimal standard we were talking about yesterday. But let's talk about stance width first. In the game of football, you need your feet up and under you for balance, leverage, power, and mobility. Pretty much everything the game's all about. Your normal football stance is going to be a little bit wider than the shoulders, but when we get into long snapping, we need 4, maybe 6, or with a long-legged guy like you, maybe 8 inches wider, simply because we just need more operating room between the legs so we can make an unrestricted, uninhibited throw down underneath the torso and back through the legs. Make sense? Coming in yesterday, we thought you were just a little bit narrow, which is going to constrict you. You're going to run into resistance as you're trying to accelerate that ball to target. So I want to get you on here right now. Take a look at where the stance width is right now. Make sure that everything's looking good and you feel comfortable with it. Facing the camera. Yes, sir. Okay. As a general rule, what we look for is to see that the knees are slightly wider than the shoulders. And in this case, they're really not. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. A couple of things. Number one, you already have your toes slightly outward, and that's a good thing. It points the knees outward slightly and gets them out of the way. But also, as you sit into that stance, the first thing I'd like you to do is push the knees out over the toes. That's going to maximize the room between the legs without necessarily getting your feet too wide. And as we discussed yesterday, you get too wide, that can lead to a host of other problems and issues. Does that feel comfortable? Okay. You're going to be adding a lot of body mass probably over the years as well, so I think we're going to need that space. Now here's what's important besides having the knees a little wider than the shoulders. The load bearing of the body for comfort and greatest explosive potential needs to be on the quads. If you ever feel hip pressure in the hip flexors, that's an indication you're getting too wide. It's going to create tension, it's going to tighten you up, and therefore slow down the entire motion. Okay. Does that feel comfortable?
A little bit.
Okay, narrow it down a touch if you feel like you need to. We have seen people who are a little more narrow are quite successful with it, but we just want to make sure you've got plenty of operating room, okay? Go ahead and set up. Now, if that feels uncomfortable, let the knees drift back inward a little bit, and that should help you feel better. You like that? Okay, go ahead and stand up, step back where you were. The other things we saw coming in, you're about 6'4", we've said. You were a little bit compact. You were just kind of hunkered down. You know, if you and I are two big bruisers and we're going to face off across the line of scrimmage and crash into each other, you're not going to be trying to make yourself as small as possible. You're going to try to be open and big and aggressive and ready to take the guy on, and intimidating as well, really, okay? So we're a little kind of hunkered down for a guy as tall as you, and that's not that uncommon with a teenager simply because you grow a bunch every year. And you just got to get used to adjusting that stance, keep it big, and you know, to as big as your body has become. Not too huge a problem right there. The biggest thing I would say, and this is the thing that will probably be most important to you making huge progress as a long snapper, is you're off balance a little bit. You have long arms. You probably put the ball a little far out in front of you, but you have a real tendency and predisposition to have too much weight forward in your stance. We can see that sometimes with the heels being off the ground, and especially a measure of where are the knees in relation to the toes. If the knees are out in front of the toes, you've got too much weight forward of that center of gravity. A good thing in a three-point stance when you're firing forward to hit somebody, but when you're trying to accelerate a ball back a long distance behind you in the opposite direction from the line of scrimmage, it's going to be very counterproductive. If you're off balance or falling over during the stance, you're going to have much less control. Also, it's going to be very difficult to generate tremendous energy back in the opposite direction so you can really accelerate that football. Make sense? Okay. What I think we essentially need to do, probably take your front end, raise your head and shoulders a little higher off the ground, and then shove that weight back into the hips till we get the knees right over the toes for optimal balance. Perfect balance makes the athlete. A perfect setup, perfect balance will lead to a perfect snap almost all the time. Let's get you in here. Let's three-step you and do a couple other things to see what we can do to work it out. Okay, you ready? So you got long arms. You can have the ball a little further out. But if it's pulling weight forward, that's a problem, okay? I want you to be aware of that. Now here we go. We're going to three-step you. Pull you forward till you lean on the ball. That's going to get knee bend to 90 degrees or less. Straighten the back. Fully extend the arms. Then I'm going to raise you up, maximizing operating room under your torso. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push you back into the hips towards your target, not down to the ground, okay? Get towards your target until the heels touch the ground, knees are over the toes, you're solid on your feet. That should feel pretty darn comfortable. Lift the ball up for me. Let's make sure you're well balanced. If there's a shift in weight, now set it straight down. That's a good place to be. Give it a throw. How'd that feel? Very balanced means you're very leveraged, means you can be extremely powerful with the throw. The other thing that's important, we talked about energy flows yesterday. During the snap motion, energy should travel down the spine through the hips towards your target, and from the balls of the feet back up and into the hips, so that those two energies can combine, converge, combine, and be directed straight at your target. That's that arrow concept. Wherever that arrow's pointed, that's where the ball's going to go. For optimal snapping and efficiency, we want those energies traveling along those two planes or axes of motion and being directed straight at our target. That will help you to never throw a high ball as well. There's a couple other things we need to do on that because you're throwing great power. I don't want you to back off, but we're going to train you how to lower that throw angle so you'll never throw a high ball too. Okay, that'll come a little later in camp this morning. Let's do one more. I'm not going to three-step you, but essentially you were a little overextended. It was pulling the weight forward. The heels were off the ground. The knees were north of the toes. So I raised your front end a little bit, shoved you back to get you balanced. That's pretty simple, isn't it? Go ahead. Great snap. Let's do one more. And I want to talk about that real quickly. You know, raised you up, shoved you back to get you balanced. When we raise you up on the front end a little bit, and we're talking an inch or so, it's not much, we're taking you vertically further from the football. That's going to allow you to bring the ball slightly closer as you shove the weight back while still preserving a really good arm extension for a maximum throw. Okay, make sense? Okay, one more time. I want you to try and do that on your own. Here's really what you need to do. Raise the front a little bit, shove the belly button back into the crotch, basically, into the hips until you're balanced. 2-point balance neutral stance, and then give it a good hard throw. Feel good? Looking really solid on the feet. How's it feel? You have any questions? All right, let's go ahead and roll. Again, don't get that out of your forward, okay? Very solid. Feel good?